Hello, this is Bam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Jeremy Norrie. He's a director, producer, podcaster. You're into radio and TV and films, and you're also into ClubHouse. So I wanted to welcome you to the show. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So you've got a varied background. You have a lot of different hats you put on. Um, so we talked to you about like where you are. Are you doing all these things? Right now is like multiple hats, or are you primarily working on one of them?
Well, I do wear multiple hats kind of at different parts of the year. So during most of the year, I am a director, producer of documentary films. I fund them, and they are distributed on all kinds of free streaming platforms. So you look up my name, you can find all my films. I also have a book that I wrote. So I see you have my website up there. If you go to my website, you can get a link to my book, and that is available anytime. But I am not writing another book. I'm not really doing any journalism, or I'm not an author at the moment of
Mhm.
anything else.
But
Uh,
you just wrote that book. There's a one-time thing.
yeah. Basically, it was a portion of my past that I don't really. It's all the times I almost got arrested. I've been home invaded numerous times. It's like stories that I don't really love
Hmm.
reliving. And so I told them all kind of in depth in this book. And if anybody wants to know about them, I can kind of give them a little bit and then say, read the book. I also produce an event.
Oh,
So for about 4 months a year, produce an event in Hollywood that is in the cannabis industry.
oh, so it's like a forum.
Well, so it's a live event,
Okay.
and it is a breeders event. So for seeds, for people that are looking to grow,
Oh,
for people
planners.
that
Like,
are knowledgeable about cannabis seeds and that kind of thing.
so people who want to grow their own batch, or they're farmers.
Yeah, basically. And so I'm representing a very specific type of cannabis called autoflower, which grows very simply in a very short amount of time. It's popular in Europe, but it's not as popular here in America. And I'm trying to educate people about the advantages and maybe disadvantages to them for growing these kind of plants.
Oh, that's interesting. So that it's a whole kind of cottage industry.
Oh
But it could
yeah,
get bigger. It could get bigger if there's an interest. I guess that you're trying to you plant the
so
interest.
in Europe, it has taken over their industry.
Oh wow.
So the prediction here is that it will eventually take over the large majority of our industry as well. And so 80% or so of the plants that people are growing right now for commercial purposes, it's likely in the future that that 80% will be auto flowering plants. And they could be very similar varieties to what they're growing now, but they will have this auto flower genetic that'll make them flower faster.
Okay. So it was like genetically modified to just be able to turn over faster.
It's not necessarily modified, but selected. So
So
there's
like,
certain kinds of plants that grow in parts of the country where it's 24 hours sunlight for months and months at
oh,
a time. And those plants have evolved a different trait than the plants that are
yeah. So it's just like
more.
selected, like old fashioned kind of breeding or
Yeah,
plant.
exactly.
Yeah, instead
You
of
know,
like
like a traditional plant that you put outside, it grows, it harvests like a one watermelon a year or whatever it is, and then it goes down. And then maybe next year, if it's an annual plant, it grows again, and then you get, pears or whatever it is. But you only get it once a year. With
mhm.
auto flowering plants, they never grow again. You have to replant them every time. But you could get maybe 4 harvests in in a year because they're that fast.
They're that fast, so you could plant them that many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart. I'm not into agriculture as much. My daughter's into hydroponics, so she does a lot of hydroponics inside the house. So she's probably more familiar with what you're talking about than I am. But yeah, I think it's something that people are really interested in. because I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I use like CBD, and so a lot of things, people are, I'm a cancer survivor, and I found some benefits to that type of alternative medicine. But before we get any further into it, I always ask a couple questions of any guest that's on. It's like one of the things I always ask is like, what motivates you, and why do you do the things that you do?
Okay. Well, I enjoy filmmaking as a career. I have done various other things, and the experience of doing those jobs, there's always something very negative that you kind of have to get through, and in order to enjoy the positive part of that job. With filmmaking, I find the negatives to be very, very minimal,
Hmm.
and that um, the actual process of the work that I do is mostly talking to people and doing interviews about these various subjects that I choose to do films on. So it's like a unique form of an education. I'm getting to have like these private lectures with these different kind, almost professor type
People.
characters. They are, the leading people in their fields, or just people in various different kinds of professions with different backgrounds and upbringings, and I love that. It's so enjoyable to sit down with somebody and talk to them for a while and hear their story. And usually by the time I'm done doing interviews and sending it off, I've got another direction of a project to kind of go in. And more often than not, it has nothing to do with the project that I just did. So
Hmm.
it's like a brand new,
Brand new thing.
cool. And I really enjoy that about filmmaking. And the way we also do our filmmaking, it's based on merit. So if our films do well, then we get paid well. And so, in that sense, there's a great effort between me as the filmmaker, the distributors, they get paid that way. Everybody involved in this gets more out of the film being a success. Whereas, like traditional filmmaking, you sell your movie to Netflix and you don't really care if
You
it
don't
does
know what's
well
gonna
or
happen.
not. And there's a lot of gatekeeping in that sort of sense too, where they know they can only buy things that they know will be successful. So why take a risk on some sort of
New thing. So
grand
so you're kind of in the new frontier. You're doing like a more
absolutely.
interesting material, and it's like
I'm
if you're a creative person, right? The whole reason to be creative is you kind of want to have the muse inspire you. You want to be able to do something that's interesting. Kind of like David
right,
Bowie used to say, like he liked to be treading water a little bit to kind of go into something new. You could see his
exactly.
shape shifting. He would change things and not always do what was the last project. You do
Yeah,
something that's like going to interest you, because unless you like, the repetition, I guess some people might want to take like a musician's like, oh, I got this one hit wonder type of formula, and I'm always just want to do that single. I never want to do like Sergeant Pepper's. I just want to do hit singles.
sometimes I wonder if it's the artist or if it's the platform, the distributor, the record company, or somebody not letting you do those other things that might, maybe you do want to try, a country song, and that was never okay before, but now
Yeah.
it's a different world that we live in. And so I think also we know a lot about how our brains work. I do a lot of projects that are kind of about health and that kind of thing. And, our brains work better when they're stimulated with something new. The longer, like I do these long form interviews, but it's hard to remember everything that happened. The shorter periods of time that you take in information, you're able to remember more of that information. And our brains are like thinking all the time, especially our unconscious brains. And so you have all these thoughts going all the time. You're never thinking about the thoughts that weren't good ideas, but eventually you have 100,000 thoughts. Maybe one of those is going to be a decent idea.
Yeah.
And you just have to kind of be there to notice that. and then follow up on those types of things. And even then, a lot of these ideas kind of they start out in a way, and then as you're doing them, they morph into something else because your original plan didn't work out quite the way
Yeah.
you thought.
It's kind of like flow state. Like, if you're a fusion jazz or experimental musician, like I'm a musician, like versus being somebody who wants to just do pop music,
Mhm.
you're going to tend to say, well, I might have a very progressive point of view. I might have timing changes, key changes, polyrhythms, all kinds of things. I could take things from classical, jazz, rock, whatever. I can mix it all together, and it's kind of whatever I feel at the moment. Versus, I gotta get this same formula to hit the algorithm to hit a million plays because I want to do what's hip. Versus, like, I want to do what's in the heart.
Yeah. And I won't lie, like when we're doing our films, we're thinking about that too. You know, when I think about if I should do a movie or not, if it seems like something no one will want to watch, then that's probably not a good use of my time. Unless I already have some things that are doing so well that I can just take a risk on some, story that I like that I know won't be financially worthwhile. And also sometimes I have to think about, what what projects have we done that did well? Can we do some more projects that are parallel to that, or along the same lines? And in some of those projects, they're not my favorites. They're not my best work. When I'm doing the project, part of me is just going through the motions. But unfortunately, what we've come to learn doing, I have like somewhere between 30 and 40 documentaries now, various different subjects. Uh, People like terrible things, and not just like um, scary or horrifying or upsetting things, just low quality. Some of our films that really aren't anything to write home about. They break all these rules. We did them in from a filmmaking standpoint at a very low bar, and those are our most popular films almost always. When I work really hard on something and it's like some sort of really important subject, our last three films that I did about diet and nutrition, though I'm most proud of those. They're so good. They're my best work. They're nowhere near our most popular. Like they're doing okay, but
Mm.
yeah, it's
Well,
unfortunate.
yeah. I mean, I guess people like the I don't know. The tragedy is like a comedy. Like if you're a writer, right? You
Right.
write something that's like a tragedy, like a Shakespearean tragedy level. People are gonna like an Odysseus level type of thing. People are gonna pick up on that. Oh, I understand that. Right?
Well,
Versus,
I think sometimes there are really great quality things that become popular, and that gives everybody hope that is a creator to go out and make
right?
things that are hard to make, that are important and what have you. But I've talked to many other creators, and it's the same for everybody. Like the the thing that you're getting, the feedback that you're getting from the algorithms, from the audience, is to just put out a certain kind of quality thing that the audience wants, and that's how you're going to get the most money. And that thing that they want is um, middle of
Kinda
the
like top
road.
20, top
Like
20, top 10. Yeah, it's like
it's
yeah,
terrible. To be honest with you, it's not even okay. It's like kind of bad is really what
yeah.
they like.
Well, it's kind of like the
That's what
difference between like a critically acclaimed piece of work and then what's actually popular, right?
Oh,
Like you
even if you go mainstream movies, right? So like you
yeah,
could go to Deadpool and Wolverine, and that
yeah,
movie's just cleaning
billion
up
dollars, billion
at
dollars. Yeah,
the box office. And don't get me wrong, it's a fun movie. I enjoyed it. It was great as far as those superhero movies go. It's so expensive. Like some of the things they're doing, it's incredible. But in the
it's not Citizen
scale
Kane.
of
It's not
film,
Citizen Kane.
that's not top 100 probably. You
No,
know, so.
yeah,
Uh,
It's not the
What?
third man. It's not Citizen Kane. It's not that, right?
No, it's
So,
definitely not. And then the other side to that coin is like the I see a lot of movies. The movies that are the really best movies, nobody's going to see those.
yeah,
Like
it's like college
so
radio. It's like college radio. Like I grew up like in the IRS version of REM, Michael Stipe, when you couldn't hear what he was saying.
yeah.
Um, and I was like, yeah, that's what I want to hear. Like listening to Paul Westerberg from the Replacements, or Husker Du, Bob Mould, people like that. And that was never really hitting like Nirvana or hitting like
Oh,
Pearl Jam. That
yeah.
stuff was always kind of very underground. You was like surprised when REM kind of broke through. It's like, wow, they broke through, but I actually like the old stuff. So
Music
it's like, it's just like it's like where you are.
there there are a few great musicians that did sell a lot of albums, but I bet you like the top 100 are, the top 100 sales of all time. It's probably not a great list.
No,
There's
it's not. It's
probably
not the most like you
yeah,
hear a lot of stuff that you keep on hearing on the radio all the time. Is
yeah.
like why they keep on playing that? Like they keep on playing that Boston song, they keep on playing Tom Petty songs. Like I've heard that like a million times. Not that they're not good bands, but the idea is like how often do you hear something like a Lou Reed and the Velvets or Alex
Oh,
Chilton and Big Star? Like you won't hear that, right?
and
But that's
even
but the
now, like,
critics,
the
yeah,
top
the
10
critics.
Billboard, whatever's top 10 right now is terrible. Whatever it
No,
is,
it's
it's
not. It's not
definitely
what it
awful.
like. It's not what I listened to in '76 or '82 or
Yeah.
'91. It's like
So,
it's like you go look at the top 10 in 1867 and then look at
oh
the
yeah,
top
I'm
10
sure it
now.
was incredible.
Look
But
at that. It's like
yeah, I'm sure every single one is like some sort of incredible musician,
yeah,
probably.
it's like the actual writers that they were writing, the
Yeah.
playing level was just like at a whole level. There's like where's that today? Because everybody's just
60s,
trying.
60s and 80s are my two favorite decades, I think, for music.
Yeah, there's just a lot of it's a lot of innovation from the Beatles to Pink Floyd. The innovation of the album, the idea that you can actually not just have a one song, but get Rubber
Oh
Soul
yeah,
and
tell a
you
story.
get like Sergeant Pepper's, you get
Mhm.
Abbey Road, you get these albums not as connected as a Pink Floyd album, but it starts to tell the story. Like I actually want to listen to it as a one piece.
Right.
And a lot of artists is like, I want people to be able to kind of get the hook. He's like, oh, the baby shoes never worn. I want to get drawn into something, right?
Sure.
I want to get in there and get drawn into it. A lot of times now, I think songs are just a hook. There's
Oh
just
yeah.
there's no structure. There's no like music theory going on. It's just like so you're like very disappointed if you're like into like the idea that a song should actually mean something and feels you should feel something as much as like if I was watching Citizen Kane again
Right.
or
Yeah.
watching something that has depth. And I think it's like when you do your independent films, you're mostly doing documentaries, right? And you're diving into topics that are really kind of touching people's like that they want to get drawn in because you're telling somebody's story. You're telling something that's important, right? The
Oh,
trauma,
that's absolutely
dealing with
true.
anxiety, adversity, those are things that people can connect to.
Yes, and look, every single person wants to tell their story. They think that, this is their opportunity to kind of get exposure to this experience that they've had in life. And, regardless of whether they're telling me about how they met Bigfoot or UFOs or whatever it is, or they're a doctor or
Mhm.
somebody that's telling me about health. These stories are important to everyone, and my job as a director is kind of to just give these people a platform to feel comfortable to express themselves and tell their story.
Mhm. It's kind of like the esoteric thing of like the Bigfoot kind of thing reminds me of like $6 Million Man,
Oh
Bigfoot
yeah,
episode. but
the Bigfoot one
but
is
yeah,
fascinating. That's our most popular topic by
yeah, a
far.
lot of people get drawn into that 1970s kind of Bigfoot UFO. I'm a child of the '70s. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
Bigfoot UFOs. It's like, yeah,
Yep.
that's kind of. in the
That's
culture.
why
There's like
it's
this
strange
people
phenomenon.
want to know about those strange happenings. It's like,
Mhm.
like Leonard Nimoy in Search of. We're
Yeah,
always
yeah.
like looking for that. We're looking for that. And I think people were like, it's like, it's like it's not junk food, but people like, oh wow, that
It's
it
kind of
feels
junk
like,
food.
yeah, it's kind of like junk food.
It's it is fascinating to people, right? It's not necessarily important. I always explain it to people in this way, right? So I do these UFO, I do Bigfoot documentaries. Let's say in Bigfoot documentary, I discover Bigfoot. We prove that Bigfoot exists. Tomorrow, the world is probably going to be pretty much the same place. It's not going to change a whole lot whether
Mhm.
Bigfoot exists or whether Bigfoot doesn't exist. But if everybody started changing their diet or doing mindfulness or like one of these important topics that I've
Yeah, there's some
explored,
more
like
impactful.
it would be a different world, you know? And so that's why it bothers me
Yeah,
when I do these ones and it's like a drop in the bucket in comparison. Like we couldn't do those Bigfoot things and put no effort into marketing or pretty much anything. Even the film can take minimal effort and they will
big
do
return.
insane numbers. They pay all my bills. That's why I'm a filmmaker. Our third film that I ever made was a Bigfoot movie and it was virally popular.
Do you
So
think it's because the world is so stressful that when they find something that's like comforting, it's like eating a bag of potato chips or eating your Ben and Jerry's or something. They feel comfort in something like that, and so they get drawn into it because
so
things that are important sometimes are, well, that's hard. It's hard to eat
I
right.
wish I could say that. I wish I could say that it was a comfort thing because one of the other commonalities for these films is for them to fight with each other all the time on the internet. And that's not very comfortable. That's kind of anxiety and stressful, right?
Mm,
So
mhm.
they are. If I knew why exactly these movies were popular, it would make my job so much easier.
Yeah,
But
because you do a spectrum, so the Bigfoot one, I could probably get away with saying it's like kinda comfort food, but in the UFO one, but
maybe
once
if
you
they
talk about
just
the other
fight
ones,
about it. The
maybe
Bigfoot
not.
people are like, "Oh, Bigfoot's a human." No, no, no. Bigfoot's a primate of some kind.
He's an
No, no,
alien.
no.
He's an
Bigfoot's
alien.
supernatural. Bigfoot is like some sort of a alien or like other species that can dematerialize, or Bigfoot is like demonic, or like it.
It never
There's
ends. Yeah, there's
yeah,
it's
there's
just
a million stories, and
it's
they
like
fight
zombies.
about it.
Like, people keep on bringing back the undead. It's like, how many times can you have a zombie and, like, you
Yeah.
can't get away from them? It's like they go pretty slow. It's like, how are you not gonna get away from
It's an interesting thing. Yeah, the zombie one is also very, very popular. I wonder, I mean, maybe I should do a documentary about zombies. Maybe that would be
Well, that'll
popular. I
probably do
don't
really well because
know.
zombies are, it doesn't end. And people, like, I always thought, it's like, oh, yeah, like after you had those ones from the 70s, nobody would really want that. And there's like,
Well,
oh,
I do
people,
know that historically zombies are based on this African thing. There's actually a movie about it called, oh
like a
gosh,
history lesson.
oh, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's a old movie from maybe like the 80s, and there's like a tiger in the movie, and um, oh, I wish I could remember the name of it, but it's about the traditional zombie story, and the traditional zombie story was that they would like give you some sort of a drug that would paralyze you to where
Oh,
people thought you were dead. You would get buried, then they'd come dig you up, and then they'd keep giving you this drug, and you'd be a slave to this person, whoever that person was.
I've seen
Um,
that theme. Yeah,
yeah,
people like that theme a lot.
yeah. I wish I could remember the name of that old movie. It was a really good
They
old
even
movie.
showed up in a Miami Vice episode one time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's the history of zombies, but like now, obviously, it's like they bite you, and then
Yeah,
you want to eat brains,
Walking
and
Dead all the time.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like, you have so many different paths. Like, we haven't even talked like the MMA stuff you did.
Mhm.
An MMA fighter and like UFC. How
Yeah,
did,
so I'll just quickly run through that. Like when I was young, I got into the UFC, probably UFC 2. I started following it. I lost touch with it, found out that it became illegal. And one of my friends was watching Pride. He introduced me back to Pride. I became a huge fan of Pride. I'm still Pride for life, Pride never die.
hmm,
And I learned about MMA. I learned about martial arts. I was always interested in it. But then when you could kind of see the science behind what they were doing and like they were kind of analytically pointing out the strategies, and it became really this new sport where early on it was just kind of still like a brawl, but you could
hmm.
see the underlying sport that was there. And I became a fan. I wrote for some different online websites like MMA Weekly and Sherdog, and I wrote for another small website, and I got credentials. I became friends with Bruce Buffer and some of the people at the UFC. So I was getting to go to the UFC for free. And at that time, nobody was covering it. So I would have like a press box all
Oh
to
wow.
myself at like Mandalay Bay for free. It was really, really an incredible time. And, you know, if you're a fan of MMA, it was the golden age of MMA. It was the glory years. I watch it now and I love the sport, but it is not like what it used to
I
be.
wonder,
Um,
yeah.
and so uh, that was really cool. And I've been able to kind of reintroduce some of that into my films. I did a film called Why We Fight, where I did talked
Mhm.
about MMA. And I did a psychedelic documentary where I talked to Ian McCall, who was a fighter, and he was Uncle Creepy in the UFC and in Ryzen fighting. And he was also in my diets documentary. I
Oh
talked to
wow.
Kurt Angle also for my diets documentary.
Wow, so you're able to kind of bring people into different projects from cross them
Yeah,
over into
so
different things.
Kurt Angle is an Olympic wrestler, so he has this legitimate past, broken neck, won the gold medal. Like it's a crazy story. But then obviously probably more famous for doing WWE.
Hmm. So it's interesting that you've crossed all these paths, and some people might want to take a path like that and like stay in it. Do you get like bored, or you see that it's run its course and like it's not working for you anymore?
I think I do get bored, and I think that I'm a quick learner, and I'm not afraid to take on new challenges. And I'm also I'm not one of these people that's going to dedicate my life to becoming the absolute best at something and then sacrificing everything else in life in order to achieve that. So my
Mhm.
time is very valuable to me. When I start to run into hurdles with certain things, and maybe another door kind of opens up, I'm, you know, very open to kind of going through that other door and trying something new out. And I'm not financially wealthy. I do well enough to kind of keep the ball rolling, but hopefully something eventually does kick with all these various different things that I do to where I'm more financially stable and then able to do even more unique things that I want to do.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to find people who have this kind of very expansive view of things. Like, because a tendency today is people will say, "Oh, I got to stay in this niche." It's such a niche market. Like everything, or like if you're a producer, like, oh, you should be just a hip hop producer. That you shouldn't do rock or
Yeah.
punk or jazz. It's like you can't go cross. You just stay in your lane. And I've
I've
always been
never
like,
been that way. Even as a fan of music, I've
I
always
never.
been a fan of all music. Even when I was in high school, I would go back and forth where I liked hip hop and the hip hop kids would accept me for a little while. And then I would like metal and the metal people would accept me for a while. But if I said, oh, yeah, I also like this other thing, they'd be horrified. They'd
Yeah, to
tell
hear
the
it.
metal guys I also like Snoop Dogg. No, that's not okay. But now it's different. I think that
Yeah,
it's
playlist
much
world, people
easier to
can
be.
cross pollinate.
I think that it's much more common to be into that kind of thing. And as a musician, it's more accepting to kind of do all kinds of different things. One of my favorite musicians is Beck,
Oh,
and he has all
Beck's
these
brilliant at
albums
that.
that are just so
Yeah.
different, and they're all brilliant albums. I that's who
But
I would aspire
he can
to.
be kind of like that that folky,
Hmm.
real like a Bob Dylan level folky, and then kind of like
Yeah.
and then kind of like a slacker kind of punk
Yeah.
thing, and then
He
you
has
can
an
get into
electric
R&B
pony on that album.
Prince level like R&B, like,
Yeah.
and like who knew that he could have that diversity when I first like, oh, the loser song.
Right.
I kind of pigeonholed him and say, oh, that's what he's about. And
Yeah. You hear
then he
that and
started
it's
doing
blended.
then he did Sea Change, and I'm like, wow, that's like Dylan level stuff. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's like Tangled Up in Blue, if anybody remembers, that kind of stuff. But as a songwriter, I've always get really impressed when I see somebody has that kind of range,
Yeah.
and I didn't
That's
expect
what
it.
musicians used to be, you
Yeah,
know? And actors too. Actors, they could sing, they could dance, they could act, they could do all these different things. And I enjoy the arts. I
mhm.
want to see people do different things, and
Yeah. We
you don't
see a
have to be the
comedian
best.
take a dramatic role. You see, like a Robin Williams play a serial killer or something, or
Sure.
he plays
Hmm.
like a murderer. He's like not what you expect. It's not Mork
That's
and
what I
Mindy
like.
anymore. It's something else.
Hmm.
you know, it's like he showed the range that
Hmm.
you can be anything, right? In the fact that you're not just being pigeonholed into the same role over and over again, which
Absolutely. I like Woody Harrelson too. He's a cannabis guy, and one of my favorite movies is Natural Born Killers, where he's
oh,
this
that's
really
amazing. Yeah.
menacing, evil character. But he plays comedy roles,
Yeah. I mean,
so superbly.
he can play that crazy Kubrick stuff, he can do this. He could get into something that's like, wow, that's like Shining level,
Yeah,
like,
I like
you
people
know,
like that.
and it's like, wow, it's like you have, and that's where you want to see people show their range,
Mhm.
and and I think people want that. I mean, some people will say, oh, they want somebody to be the same, and they really don't. I think it's this. I think there's like I don't know, it's like a laziness, and there's
Oh,
like, oh,
absolutely.
to the even the audience can get lazy. Like, I
One
always
thing
kinda
I can tell you, kind of
challenge
from
the
my
audience.
perspective, um, so when I'm doing films and I have a serious film that I want to do, and I tell people my name, and they go and look at my IMDb page, and they see Bigfoot and they see UFOs.
Oh, did
Sometimes
they?
they don't want to work with me just
Oh,
because
yeah,
I've
pigeonhole.
done these movies about psychedelic medicine and cannabis or whatever movie sets them off.
It turns them
Um,
off.
it's really interesting to see how that works. Whereas it's kind of the opposite for Bigfoot people and for UFO people. When they see that I'm doing like mindfulness and diet, they feel like, oh, hell yeah. This person isn't just only doing UFO movies like all the rest of the people in that industry. So yeah, it's nice to kind of get that um, response from them, and you know, you just do the best you can with whatever it is, and hope
So,
hope that people appreciate it.
but you're into podcasting too. Like, what do you think about the podcasting stage since we're on a podcast?
So I actually mostly guest on
Oh, you
podcasts.
guessed. Oh, you're a
So
guest.
I have many podcast appearances. I have uh, helped with podcasts before, but I do not have my own podcast.
Hmm.
So I don't really know in that sense, but what I do as a director and getting people to do interviews, I would imagine is pretty similar to organizing people to appear on a podcast. And so my getting interview process has become more difficult as of late, where I've approached a lot of different people to be interviewed, and they don't respond, or they uh, decline the interview. And
Wow.
so I've had to start kind of going to other resources. And what I've found is helping me lately is asking people that I've previously interviewed whether they know anybody that they think I could talk to. And
Yeah,
that
like,
seems to work pretty well.
yeah, it's kind of like the Rolodex effect.
Yeah.
As a podcaster, like I've interviewed, I don't know, 1,000 people because I've had like 1,000 episodes, and then I get a lot of referrals from guests I've had. So if I go back to my guest is, oh yeah, I think I recommend you talk to Phantom here and there,
That's the
and
best for me.
you get a lot of if you go back and you've done it for a number of years, your Rolodex gives you leads. You start
Yep,
getting these leads because you're showing up. If I keep on showing up 5 times a week, people see me, people see
that's
I'm out
exactly
there.
how it works for me too.
Yeah, and then you get the follow-ups. I get people now to just say, "Oh, I wanna be on the show," and I'm like, "Where do you? I don't know who you. Where do you come from?" "Oh, so and so told me about you." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even know that was working."
That's ideal. Once you have a following and you get kind of bigger audience, all of this stuff just seems to work for itself, right? Like when I was saying about the Bigfoot things, we put those things out, they just kind of have a life of their own. And then I work on other stuff that needs my help.
Mhm. Yeah, like when your dream project is really the one that takes like your artistic, like you, oh, I'm gonna do something complex film wise or direction wise or topic wise. And like you're saying, sometimes it's the Bigfoot and the UFO stuff that actually you don't have to put as much into it, into in the craft of it. And then you're kind of like, oh, well, I guess that helps me do those. Like if I do the UFO and the Bigfoot, then I can do my dream projects, even though they're not
And
bringing in.
yeah, and I enjoy them. I try to make them into stuff that we find fun. So our latest Bigfoot project that we're about to come out with is entitled Bigfoot Isn't Real.
Oh,
And
that's gonna tick
so,
people off.
yeah, so all my other projects are the opposite side of the story. So this time we thought, let's just see what
The
happens
response
when
is,
we,
yeah,
yeah, we go ahead and debunk. We're just going to go hard on the debunk story and see what happens. And
yeah.
that's fun. I'm doing UFO stuff, and there's always new. You give a project like UFOs a year or two, and there's always new stuff to talk about. So I'm interested in all that. I like UFOs. I definitely believe there's some weird stuff going on. There's things we don't know about. I don't know whether that means aliens. There's definitely weird stuff that we don't know about going on, and I
Yeah,
want to know.
yeah.
So I find that fascinating, and I have all these other I'm very fascinated in the afterlife, and I'm
Oh,
fascinated by
spiritual stuff
psychedelics.
like ghost and supernatural. Have you gotten into that
Oh,
paranormal type of
absolutely.
thing?
We've done an EVP, so electronic voice phenomenon. We have a couple documentaries in that world. We have a couple that are kind of about afterlife and ghost stuff. Um, the thing I'm trying to do right now that I keep getting cold shouldered on is child reincarnation stories.
Hmm.
I contacted maybe 20 different people, and absolutely none of them want to be interviewed.
Well, that's
And
weird. You
yeah,
would
one
think
of
they
them is
would.
literally a university that has a program studying this. And like the response I got from them was very abrupt. I wrote back to them, even kind of asking for maybe a little direction or help. Nothing. And so it's perplexing me that
That's
this thing
strange.
that has been so profound, like to me, this is the most proof of anything supernatural that I've ever seen, and they don't want to talk about it. So um,
So
that's
they just want to
frustrating.
be proprietary. Like you got to go and pay their fee to
I
be
don't
in
know
their
what
program,
it is.
and not.
Um,
So it's like tribal knowledge. Like knowledge. If you come into our group, you get it, but we
well,
don't
I'm
want
going
to
to keep
share it.
trying, and I'm going to find somebody or a few somebodies to talk to me about this, and I will make something. So they're not
That's
going to
cool.
stop me.
Yeah, you
But
got to find out anyway.
yeah, it's just frustrating. It'd be a lot easier if I could just fly to the university and interview the main guy. Like it would be so simple to get this project going. But no, it's got to be difficult. And then like I do all these like psychedelic things where people are hallucinating, and I find a lot of parallels between the hallucination experiences on various different drugs and like near death
Hmm.
experiences
Yeah,
and
you can
some
tie that.
stories
Yeah,
of the afterlife, to where if there weren't these child reincarnation stories, I don't know that I would believe in the afterlife at all. But
Maybe you can thread the needle and have all those things in one thing.
I'm going to keep plugging away at it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because like you kind of like oh yeah, it's all coming together. It's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and sprinkle this in, and it's like, oh, that's the ticket. That's the
Cool.
way it goes.
I'm
Yeah,
working on psychedelics again and alternative medicines in general. And
yeah,
so
that seems
I
kind
have
of
a
big.
couple interviews, and we'll see where it goes.
Within the, like the kind of you know, there's a whole like non-Western type of focus of
Right.
homeopathic, holistic
Holistic.
medicine that's going in that direction. There's a lot of people I've interviewed who are like, therapists or practitioners of these type of things, of
Sure.
doing non-traditional theory, using mushrooms or using
We
other
have
types.
we have
Yeah.
ketamine clinics now, so you can go to a place where you can have assisted injected ketamine, and those experiences are some of the most powerful psychedelic experiences out there. So
Yeah,
it's
it
it's a
seems like
lot.
that you would be able to get an audience for that, depending on how they pitch it. You don't know how these
Yeah,
whatever the platforms are, but it
I
seems
did
like
a couple before that did okay, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to take another crack at it. I think
mhm.
I did this microdosing seminar at this event, and I noticed that after the event they did a question and answer period, and all the questions were about macrodosing, like heavy dose.
Oh
And
wow.
so I thought, okay, this is interesting. People want to know. They're like dipping their toes in with the microdosing, and you'll see like grandmas and people you would never imagine trying this out. Their questions were about doing heavy doses, and so I thought probably there should be a film about that. Maybe we can kind of answer some of these questions.
Yeah, what are people looking for? It's kind of like, I think in
Hmm.
the 60s people were looking for enlightenment. They were looking for the kind of hippie-esque experience, and then that was kind of frowned upon in
Right.
the backlash. And now we're living in an age where, yeah, at the same time we got people that don't like that stuff. But we got other
Yeah,
people who are saying, well, why can't I explore that stuff? So it's not all unified where everybody hates it, everybody loves it. There's like
that's
groups
true.
of people that want to try it and the people that don't. And so,
Even
you
historically, it was there's some nefarious stuff going on with the CIA and acid and all kinds
oh
of other
yeah,
things. And
there's a
so
lot of history on that.
it was a weird time for all those drugs, and if you've taken some of those medicines, um I've thrown events where people were doing them a lot, and one of the things that I would commonly see at the events, you usually don't have fights or any sort of problems like that, but sometimes people will take a heavy dose and they will get some sort of weird ego type thought going on where
Mhm.
they think that it's their job now to help people try this drug or encourage people to do that, or maybe like a religious connotation where they're like Jesus, or
Mhm.
connected to some sort of
Spiritual
you know
awakening
maybe, yeah, and now it's their job to kind of do this other thing.
cause. Yeah.
And it can be weird, and I think people are just like they've seen all these like movies where they show people tripping, and like the trips are almost never remotely like what actually tripping is like.
Yeah.
And they're just nervous. They don't want to have a negative experience, but they are looking for something. I don't know even that they're looking to heal always. It seems like many of the well, there are of course some people that are taking these drugs because they're struggling with something in their life, and they
Mhm.
think either the drug is like a silver bullet, it's going to just fix this thing automatically. They take it one time and then all of a sudden they're going to be better. And there are some situations like that, but I would not encourage people to do them that way. Generally, if you're getting something out of psychedelics medicinally, it's because you're able to do the work yourself. You're able to think yourself through these problems and come up with alternative answers, or direction where maybe you were hitting a wall, or
Yeah, you're kind of uncovering the onion. You're going into your past blocks, right? The walls you put up.
yeah,
A
most of
lot
these
of
drugs
times,
just make you kind of focus on these problems in a way where you're going to figure it out. And
yeah, it's like the looking glass self. It's like
mhm,
what's Alice in Wonderland, but it's like this idea like you're gonna break through the walls, like Jim Morrison, like break on through. Like if you can get past your hangups, you get past the barriers and the ceilings that you put on yourself. Like a lot of
yeah,
times people have these like roadblocks, these internal roadblocks, and if they can't get through it with just their own mind power without
yeah,
any kind of assistance, they need some external.
and
In the
also like
pharmaceutical world finds ways to do it, but it's like, well, there's other things that existed for these pharmaceuticals.
there are situations where I've seen like some war people that have PTSD where they need to kind of revisit this on the regular, maybe a couple times a year even. And it's never going to cure them of this problem, but it's a sort of therapy to
Yeah,
where they're
therapeutic.
able to kind of deal with this when times are getting rough, and they can kind of reintroduce this and then kind of reset, and then let this build up again and then reset again, and deal with their problems. Maybe someday they do figure out a type of cure or a way of living with these things that they have, but it's one of the problems is you don't want to see somebody just do drugs and then like it becomes a new routine
It
where you're
becomes a
like,
new
oh
problem. Well,
yeah,
you're
a new
using it to
problem.
get rid of the problem, and it creates a new problem.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
then they're
just
now just
replacing one thing with the
tripping on
next
these
thing.
things in a non-productive way.
Yeah,
And
like if you
you know,
if it can actually assist you in your life trying to uncover like your truth or trying to figure out where you're blocked and you use it to do that and it's not being just used in excess. I think a
yeah,
lot of times people use something because it becomes the new thing to
hmm,
replace the old thing
yeah.
and it just becomes another bad thing.
So many of my friends drink and do cocaine, and those drugs. There's no enlightenment at the end of that
Yeah, you're gonna
path.
hit the wall. You're gonna hit some wall. It's not gonna
So
end
it's
well.
up to you. What are you
Usually it
gonna do?
doesn't.
And those things, I'm sure it's fun to do, but unfortunately, they just rejected MDMA as a therapy for PTSD, and I think that's a tragedy because drugs like that are very helpful. And so it's unfortunate that people are still going to have to make those choices and get these drugs in crazy ways, but maybe someday psychedelics and things like that will be an alternative choice, not just for medicine, but for recreation too.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of like certain people in certain industries have reasons to keep things out. Because if they're not part of it, then they're put the
Yeah,
kibosh on it.
I think also society needs to kind of develop an understanding of how these things are going to work, and kind of a collective understanding to where if you were to see somebody on mushrooms, it's not like a panic, or that it becomes more like if you were to see somebody that drank too much,
Yeah.
and you kind of know what's going on with that person. If you saw somebody that took too many mushrooms, you kind of know what's going on with that person too. And the more society kind of gets this knowledge and can kind of collectively handle there's always going to be problems if we have legalized acid, or if we have legalized ecstasy, or legalized DMT. There's going to be situations that aren't perfect, and it's just us as a society. How are we going to deal with these things? And
We
hopefully,
we deal with the alcoholics all the time. We deal with people, alcohol is the approved drug,
yeah.
and
And
how much damage does it cause all the time?
I
You
mean,
know,
look, you go to a home situation like home domestic violence. Alcohol is
yeah,
frequently
drunk
a
driving
problem.
accidents. I mean, how many
Drunk
people get
driving is
killed?
one of the main ways to
Yeah,
kill.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that's the approved thing,
Mhm.
but it has a cost that's kind of hidden
Yeah,
because people
and I
don't want
think
to
the
talk
main
about it.
reason they want to accept alcohol is because it is also um, kind of it promotes sex, and
Yeah.
that's their main reason probably for keeping it around is because it makes social situations so much easier in
It's the social lubricant to keep
Yeah.
things like
Hmm.
in motion because you can't come in there cold.
Oh
Which
yeah,
would
and I
actually
can't
like
imagine
if you
some of these
actually came in there
politicians.
cold, then maybe you wouldn't make certain decisions.
Yeah, yeah, I can only imagine what it's like. And if people were taking drugs that made them think a lot, maybe they'd make a mistake once or twice, but they're not going to,
Probably not gonna do it
spare their
every
life for
Saturday night, every Friday night. You're probably
that.
not gonna make that same mistake.
Yeah. Uh, it's unfortunate that the people that are making the decisions for our planet, uh, they have agendas that we don't really understand, and there's all these speculations like they're killing babies, or I don't know what it is, but it seems more likely that it's some sort of sex and drugs type things that our politicians are interested in. And if we were to know what they were up to, uh, that probably is influencing a lot of their decision making.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot of agendas, but a lot of times it's just a matter of you know, people want to have power over other people, and if you can control, power in itself is an ambition. The
Yeah,
power to not even make money, but to actually control thought and control action makes people feel like, well, okay, I'm in charge. If I can stop this behavior, I'm in charge. If I can stop this type of person from being here, then I feel successful. So that's sometimes the goal is that's the goal.
I wonder sometimes. I look at these politicians, and they say a lot of stuff, and they all have a lot of money, and then you don't really know a lot about their private lives, and or then they do stuff like go to Bohemian Grove. They do
Oh yeah,
weird things. They
they
do
they
weird
don't
things.
do as they say. They don't do as they say. They do things that are totally the opposite of
And
what
they
they
like to
say
be
they
around
are.
each other. If you've ever been in those situations where they're like, oh, and they're very like careful about who's around and who can see them, if they're
Yeah,
anyone like taking pictures, like they're the Puff Daddy parties don't have pictures,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Well, it's hypocritical. It's kind of like you think about you go back to ancient Rome. You go back to
Yeah.
it's like what were those senators doing
Oh
with
yeah.
some of the? It's like they weren't the pious people they said they were.
Exactly.
It's like if in front of this person you're the pious this, like yeah, but behind the door, you're not that pious person.
Exactly. It's just like every cult where they're like, oh, by the way, I need to sleep with everyone's wife. And there's just all this weird stuff going on.
Yeah,
And
a lot of weirdness that
almost
you're like, what?
always almost always sex and drugs related. And if we could just kind of get that uh,
That
ironed
would be
out.
awesome. Yeah, we got to get people to realize it's like it's not. Some people want you to believe the hype, like the cover story.
Hmm.
Like, there's a lot of cover stories.
Yeah, there are.
There's a lot of cover stories, so you gotta take it with a grain of salt.
I
You
guess in a
know,
way I should be thankful, right? Because now my
get
job
more,
is to
get more work.
expose all these stories as a
You got more
documentary.
work. Yeah, you got a lot
So,
of work to good.
yep,
You could
my
find.
job is to find these tales and these different topics and give them a platform so that people can learn about them and make different decisions. So,
Well, that's empowerment. I think if you power people with this information, like being in the documentary space, is like you can, it's like an investigative journalist.
yeah,
That we used to
exactly.
see. We used to see a lot more, and we don't see as many. Um,
I'm doing a project right now about mentalism. And if you know what mentalism is, it is basically when magicians seem like they are brainwashing people or reading their minds. And I'm learning all of these things are techniques.
mhm.
And are these techniques being used in modern society? Well, it turns out they are. And so our latest project's gonna be a really interesting one where it talks a lot about mentalism, but then We also have some stuff to kind of talk about this brainwashing and mind reading stuff. It's
Oh, that's
interesting.
cool. That's
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of well, the art of war and the art of social constructs. A lot
Yeah.
of times, like you take a lot of those techniques to if you want to be successful with like in corporate America, there's a lot
Sure.
of mind games within the Fortune 500 that
Absolutely.
people are kind of brainwashed into these mindsets, right? That
Right.
kind of that the mindset that makes you feel, yeah, it's okay to throw all those chemicals in the river because that's a good thing. like
I
like
have a whole list of all these techniques, and it's like things like nonverbal cues, forcing, and there's all these things that we've kind of lost uh, respect for because we live in this distracted modern society with all this flashy text messages and videos, and you're not seeing what people are doing just with their hands and just with their eyes, and uh, uh, the way they speak even can change the way that you react. So
yeah,
so much of it is technique, and uh, having this experience has inspired me to try and learn more about it and maybe develop some of these techniques so that I can use them in my life too.
yeah, it's important to learn from what have that situational awareness and
Mhm.
learning that well if they can do it I can do it. you take
Apparently
adva-
anyone.
you take
So
advantage of it. But I want to thank you for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. The Sky Island .com URL, is that the way people can connect with you?
that's my website. It has a link to my IMDb page, which is the most up to date place for all my films and projects that I've worked on. Um, it has links to my email. It has links to my social media. So definitely the skyisland.com. People can connect with me there. As a filmmaker, it helps me if people review my movies. So on Amazon, you can
Mhm.
type in my name. I have a page on
Oh,
Amazon, shows you all
we
my
can read through
movies.
it.
You can do that on Tubi TV. You can do that on IMDb, and IMDb has a rating system as well. So rate all my movies 5 stars or 10 stars, the
Yeah.
highest rating, and leave comments. You can leave reviews also, all
That's
that
cool.
kind of stuff. It helps me on YouTube to like the movies and leave comments and share them. All that stuff
That's
is the
awesome.
way of the future.
Yep, that link will be fully clickable on all the platforms when the podcast is published. So you won't have to remember. You'll be able to click right through and do go check out on Amazon and leave reviews because that's a valuable thing for our guests. Like if you check out the URLs we give you and then you follow to where the content is. If you can do the reviews, that is appreciated because that shows that you're diving in deep, and we encourage you to dive in deep to your whole catalog of what you've been doing. So thank you very much for giving us a picture into a window into what you do, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.